Okay. All right. Good evening. Welcome to our monthly broadcast. Excited that you're here tonight. We got so much to cover that's so exciting. We want to give you a 10,000-foot view of this topic, the emotions and the autoimmune system. Guys, this is huge, and it's really powerful. And what I want to do is I kind of want to lay a foundation. You know, back in the day, not too long ago, a decade ago, there was this belief system that here's your emotions and here's your immune system, and they were not connected. And if something happened to you, it was in the amygdala, in the hippocampus, hypothalamus, pituitary, that area. Sometimes you talked about down in the medulla. This is where all the emotions rest. And as time has evolved, you know, they started seeing a little bit of a connection here and there. But I want to take you back to a groundbreaking study back in 1974. It was performed by Nicholas Otter. And it was kind of interesting because he was dealing with rats and doing some training and trying to do some behavioral shaping. And he wanted to kind of prove a theory. And so he took the rats and he would feed them sugar water. And rats, if you know much about rats, they very much get attached to sugar and they just go right after it. And so he'd feed them the sugar water and they'd come in and they'd just go crazy. And they were drinking it up and everything, and then he was able to train them to turn lights on and jump through hoops, close doors, and all kinds of fun stuff through this behavior shaping. And then he had this thought, well, we're going to try to get them to recognize through this behavior training that sugar is bad and they won't go to it. And so he put the sugar water out and they started drinking, and he gave them a shot that would cause them to be sick. And he was hoping that they would make this association to the sugar water. They drink the sugar water and then they would get sick. And it was really interesting because after a short period of time, half of the rats died. And boy, he couldn't believe that. So he got the rats back up healthy again and brought in some new rats and gave them the sugar water, and away they went. Gave them the injection again. They drank the water. They got sick. And they started to die again. So he got them up good, and he went ahead and started giving them sugar water to start the third time. And after they started drinking the sugar water, they became sick again and died. And he did not give them the shot. And so they did all kinds of work. They went in and started looking at the rats' immune systems prior to and then after, and they run this test over and over and over again. And they had exact same results. And what they found is the drug that they actually gave the rats to make them sick was an autoimmune suppressant. It actually suppressed the immune system. And that's what caused the rats to die. But what was interesting about it is that after the rats that had survived, that had the drug, that didn't die, that came out of it, and they were all better, and it had been 6 months, and they started them on the test again, all they did is gave them the sugar water, and the rats died. And so from this test, he went on and involved some internal medicine doctors and immunologists and quite a few different practitioners in the medical field, and they replicated this test over and over and over. So they give them the sugar water, give them the injection, half the rats would die. The other half that didn't die were really super sick. He'd get them well again, wait for 6 months, just give them sugar water, and half of them would die. And they found through this test that the immune system actually could learn, that the immune system would actually, and this is why it was such a groundbreaking study back in 1974, is because the immune system is not connected to anything, just to your immune system, and it can't learn, it can't develop, it can't communicate. Well, this study was swept under the rug. Boy, it really flew in the face of everything that's out there. It's kind of scary to the medical world, that the immune system can learn. You can train it to be strong, you can train it to be weak, you can train it to be whatever you want it to be. It can't be. And so this it was just really shot down and swept under the rug. And that's kind of where it stayed for, well, since 1974. But the thing that's so amazing is that our bodies are faced with three challenges, three core issues that we need to really take a look at. And once we understand this, we can really see how that starts to impact our bodies and our emotional wellness. So the first core issue is environmental contaminants and toxins. Guys, you know all around us constantly we are being bombarded. In fact, Dr. Whiting made a comment several years ago that we're being bombarded with over 13,000 different chemicals and toxins every day. I think, to be honest with you, that's super conservative. I think it's much, much higher than that. So every day we're being bombarded by these environmental toxins. This is the first core issue that we need to take a look at that's impacting our body's health and wellness. The second is nutrition and diet. Where are we standing in this? Are we compromising and saying, oh, a little bit of synthetic stuff is good, we can get by with that? Or are we trying to be more pure with our nutrition and eating habits? You know, it's funny how our food has been so depleted. It's funny how there's so many pesticides and herbicides and other chemicals and GMO foods out there that are really starting to create a real challenge in the general population. And so we have to look at core issue number 2. And now our final core issue, emotional wellness. Guys, we really know from as early as 1974 with Dr. Ader, coming right up to the present day, amazing research now has been done and is showing us that there is a direct link between your health, your body's wellness level, whether it be 10 or 0, is directly connected to your emotional wellness. And if we're not managing that part of it, there is a real super challenge in our life. And so here's something, guys, I want you to take a look at. Just not too many years ago, there was an article from South Africa in the South African Journal of Science. One practitioner proclaimed that he estimated there's like 90% of all physical problems have emotional roots. Now you think about that, emotional roots. So where is the beginning, where is the genesis of that physical problem? It was back at the emotional root area, right? Some trauma, and guys, please don't just think, oh, they got smacked upside the head or they're in a car wreck or someone sexually molested them. There is more to emotional wellness than just having trauma. Yeah, trauma is the big bad thing we look at all the time, and people think, oh, I've never had trauma in my life, so why am I have all these here physical problems? You know, he estimated that 90%, and he's being very conservative with that. You got to really stop and think. Much more is being bombarded on us than what we kind of look at. And I've been teaching for a long time, and now research has been catching up to all this, and it's kind of fun. Emotional trauma is a precursor to physical disease. And now there's a growing body of evidence that indicate that virtually every illness, from arthritis to migraine headaches, from the common cold to cancer, is influenced for good or bad by how we think. Now you got to think about this, how we think and how we feel. Those are, you think about it, was there trauma mentioned there at all? Not one bit. How we think and how we feel. Now solid research is now confirming that many physicians have long observed, what they have long observed is the state of mind is directly connected to your physical wellness or illness, something that you have to really take a look at. And this is what Dr. Ader was trying to teach in 74, that the immune system can be trained to be strong or it can be trained to be weak. And that's kind of the global thing we have to look at here. Now, there's a huge word out there, and this you can find this on thescience.com. It's psychoneuroimmunology. I think I said that right. Immunology. It's a big old word. This is a study of the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system, and how they literally communicate one with another. Literally, it's not something like, you know, the hoodoo voodoo and all the stars line up during the second solstice of the year. It is really as we need to look at and view an absolute scientific discipline, not hoodoo voodoo, hanging crystals from your rearview mirror and making things go funny. This is hardcore scientific research that your body communicates. For years I've been teaching that your body speaks volumes. Are you listening? This is what it's about. Your emotional wellness is more than just the absence of trauma. You need to really think about that. I haven't been in a car wreck my whole life, so why am I all screwed up? It has a lot more to do than just that. There is a lot of evidence. So let's just kind of take a look at some of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, Ori's done quite a bit of research on this as he wrote his paper. I'm going to have him kind of jump in here and kind of expound a little bit on some of these as we go through it. But crazy here. Hostility. Ori, what happens when you're faced with hostility in the workplace or at home or in the community? What kind of challenges come your way?
Well, a little bit on the spot. Thank you, Dana.
I love it.
Well, I guess before we get into that, I think it's important that we go back to that psychoneuroimmunology and talk about that a little more. I know we blew past it really fast. But psychoneuroimmunology is not just some term at thescientist.com. It's an actual complete field of study. It's a fairly relatively new field of study, but it is a field of study and a field of research. And it's the field, basically, when you take that big psychoneuroimmunology, basically it is the scientific research to the mind and body connection. And it even expands into the spiritual side of it. So this is mind, body, and spirit.
So but this is more than just feng shui or some little thing.
This is not necessarily feng shui or traditional Chinese medicine, but this is hard scientific research that shows that these connections between the mind and the body and potentially even the spirit. And when they're talking spirit, they're not talking about, things that float in the night. They're talking about, that connection to a higher power, that connection to something more than you. They're talking about research that's been connected to those different pathways. Now, the reason why it's called psychoneuroimmunology is because it's the connection of the nervous system, immune system, and endocrine system. And so it's important that we recognize that that's the whole field of study. And the real powerful thing about this is if we're talking about the immune system like you were talking about earlier, they found that, when you talk about the nervous system, typically that's the system that has all the communication, right? Has the neurotransmitters and it sends the signals to tell the body what to do. But what they found is that the immune system can actually produce its own communication path networks through the same signaling mechanisms as the nervous system. They create their own neurotransmitters, which is really powerful.
Pretty impressive.
Because if you think about that, they signal the body to create a response before the brain even knows about it. Then once the brain receives that signal, it goes through its process to do the same signaling. And so that's where we can get into these hyperactive immune systems, is when the immune system has been set in a pathway of either hypersensitivity or in a pathway of hypersuppression.
So once again, this here, because it communicates like that, and can develop its own communicative pathways, it helps us to understand how the body can literally be tricked or fooled into attacking the very tissues it was designed to protect.
Well, and on the other end of that, the connection to the endocrine system, right? That's typically where all the hormones are produced.
Yep.
But they found that the endocrine system, just like the immune system, just like the nervous system, can act singly without the influence of either system.
So they can act individually or collectively?
They can act individually, and when they act individually, they will impact collectively the other ones. Or they can act collectively. But if we have this state of hypersensitivity, right, and we have this state where it just constantly keeps producing hormones because the signaling system has not told it to turn off, now we go into this hypersensitive state, and the body has to try to figure out how to work through that. So it gets back to your question with hostility. Hostility is not necessarily there's other areas, but in this one specifically, when we're talking about hostility, I think we're talking specifically the individual. and their state of being hostile. I think a lot of times you think of hostility, thinking of, you know, gang members on the street, going out, beating people up, raping them, stealing their money. But as you can see in this PowerPoint, it says it can be the person that's at risk is someone who generally just feels that other people can't be trusted. So when you take hostility and define it in those ways, how many of us fit into
all
that?
into that.
But what ends up happening is it starts triggering those mechanisms. It either causes the adrenal glands to fatigue by sending out the fight or flight response. It causes cortisol to increase. It causes CRH, which is basically the signaling pathway in the brain that triggers for anxiety and other things like that. It causes all these things to signal. So if you're constantly in a hostile state, I mean, these different things, you know, anxiety, fear, depression, stress, all of those things are mechanisms to protect the body.
Yeah.
But when the body's not meant to be in a consistent state.
Constantly, yeah.
So when it stays in a consistent state, then those signaling pathways that are supposed to terminate it don't terminate, and it goes into a state of hypersensitivity.
So we wind up going into a state of either hyper, or in some cases, some of the functions go into a hypo state. And when that happens, either hyper or hypo, we now are in a state of pre-disease, and left long term, we go into different physical problems, physical challenges, all the way into whatever disease you want to put the title down. Fibromyalgia, lupus, cancer. Let's take a look at anger. Just the emotion anger. Where is the main impact on that one?
You know, a lot of these will have the same impacts. You know, a lot of them are going to kind of go back to the body working through those. But there's a bullet point in this slide, and it says it provokes the body to create unhealthy chemicals, right? But the powerful thing is, for hostile people, anger is a poison. So hostile people who already have those, who now have anger or rage, now produce unhealthy chemicals, which is causing further problems. But you know, there's a lot of different avenues as far as what happens with anger. I think for the sake of this conversation, we won't necessarily go into all of the, because we're kind of getting into some deeper stuff there, right?
We are. We seem to always jump off.
So we'll kind of keep it at a higher level, but just understand that these emotional things, anger, hostility, fear, depression, anxiety, all these different things, when you feel fear, it's a psychological and a physiological change that's happening in the body.
It's just not emotional.
It's just not emotional. You have hormones that are spiking up. You have neurotransmitters. You have immune system responses that are either spiking or decreasing. In the sense of stress, your immune system actually goes down, because when you have stress, the body's saying, hey, I need to take all of my fuel, I need to take all my focus, I need to gear it towards the most essential parts of the body, which is going to be, in this case, the organs, the brain, and the muscles. Because if I'm going to have to fight a gorilla, I need to have heightened senses. I need to be strong. So if I'm constantly in a state of stress, I never enter into the state of rest and digest.
Right.
And I'd never enter into the state of repair and rebuild. Right. So these people who live on caffeine, who do a synthetic stress response in a sense, they never allow their body to move into the rest and digest. And so what ends up happening is the food doesn't fully digest, the nutritions don't fully come out. They can develop different food allergies. They can develop different autoimmune diseases, because the body has to go into rest and digest, has to go into repair and rebuild. And if we constantly keep it in that stress response, we allow those different signals that were meant to protect the body to be the same signals that don't allow the body to heal.
To heal correctly. So guys, let's just kind of walk down the path just a little bit here. I think you'll kind of enjoy this. Think about the last time that you were super angry. And the reason I want to use this, how did you feel when you ate? Did you feel bloated? Did you have a lot of flatulence afterwards? Did you just feel horrible? And did that extend for a fairly long period of time? And that's what we're talking about here. is it's not an emotional response only. Yes, you have the emotional response, but then you have all the physiological things that go along with it, and it shuts down that homeostasis of digestion and the homeostasis of repair. And when that happens, you wind up in a situation that starts running out of control. And in long periods of time, man, you can see all kinds of stomach problems. You know, Crohn's, diverticulitis, diverticulosis. There's a myriad of them, guys, just a myriad of them. But see, we're talking about the heavy anger. But what about just something as simple as the lack of control? Let's talk about that for a little bit. Just the lack of control.
Go on.
Yeah.
This was something that I found super interesting. Very powerful team. You don't really think about it. So they call it the locus of control is the technical term that they call it. But the locus of control is just basically the feeling that you're in control of your destiny. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in control of every situation, but that you feel like you have a positive impact on your destiny. And what was interesting is they took, and this is what this slide talks about, they took people who are traditionally in a higher stress environment, managers, supervisors, people who have to make very stressful decisions on a daily basis. And they did a research on them to compare the stress levels of those people versus and it wasn't necessarily the stress levels, but it was the impact. So the different hormones or the different neurotransmitters.
So you looked at different markers in the body.
Looked at different markers to determine what rate of cardiovascular disease they might have.
Oh, wow.
And so what they found, and they assumed, these higher managerial people will have much higher levels, right? So they took those people and they tested them against kind of more mid-level people or people who, for the lack of a better word,
come to work, go home.
Kind of the grunts of the business. They just come. They don't really have any say. They don't really contribute to the business in any way other than what they've been told to do. You just do your job. You shut up. I don't want to hear from you. Just do your job and go home, right? And what was interesting is they found that not the people who had higher stress levels, who had higher higher demands of making decisions, those things, even though those people, the higher managerial people, had higher elevated levels of stress, cortisol and different things going through the body, they found that the people who had a lower feeling of locus of control, being in control of their destiny, even though those other people had higher levels of cortisol and stress, the lower managerial people were 3 times higher at risk of heart disease than the other one.
Holy cow. Guys, that's powerful. Just think about this. When you feel the lack of control, and what's going through the nation right now during this election, we all feel like we have no control. It's just going to play out however it's going to play out. Just think of what's happening to your bodies. And that's just something on a national level. What's happening on your personal level, your work, your home, your community, what's going on. Just something as simple as that can create a lot of challenges with emotional wellness. And so, guys, I'm just going to kind of give you a little kind of a list of some of the things that you can look at that might kind of jog your thinking as we've done this 10,000-foot view of emotional wellness. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide and take a look at some of the other markers.
Okay. Before we jump there, Dan, if you don't mind, there's just one part on here I really want to point out on the slide. And this is super powerful because you don't typically think this amount of damage can happen. But I'm just going to read it. The combination of high demands and low control appears to rise the risk of heart disease as much as smoking or having a high cholesterol level.
Holy cow.
That research was done and published in 1983.
That long ago. And where have we heard it? You don't hear about it. You have to go dig these things out. But here's some of the other emotional factors, the list that you want to look at. Social support. Do you have good social support? Do you have a good network of people around you that you can rely on? Very important. Relationship. For years I've been teaching this. If you're in a toxic relationship, you need to heal it or get out of it. Because a toxic relationship can really be damaging. And I'm not talking just spouse. That could be, you know, extended family. That could be even pets. We have several distributors that had toxic relationships with their pets. Self-esteem. Where is your self-esteem? This all plays into your emotional wellness, not just trauma. Something to worry, anxiety, fear, depression, despair, grief, bereavement, loneliness. These are all areas that impact your emotional wellness and stability. You know, feelings buried alive never die. And they're there, they're smoldering, and they will create a huge deficit in your physical wellness. And so it's so important to really take a look at what we're talking about here. Now, as we come to your areas and we do our everyday trainings and stuff, we're going to be focusing a little bit more, in more depth, more personal depth on emotional wellness and how that plays out in your life. And so I'm really excited about the aspect of what we have here, and I know Ori is too. Ori, final words?
You know, just the fact that emotional wellness is very important. We typically focus on the immediate physical pain.
Yep.
Or maybe lack of energy or brain fog or any of those things, and we very rarely take an opportunity to look inward. And when we release, typically it's from the outside in, right? And so what we'll see a lot of times when releases come is you get worse before you get better, right? You do a release and all of a sudden you break out in hives, or you break out in rashes, or you get a head cold, or you get something like that. In a lot of cases, people think that's an indication that the application didn't work, but that's something that we should look at as it's actually working, because usually when it goes from outside in, right, you have to peel back the layers. But, you know, just like we said earlier on, 90% of physical illness or pain can be connected back to emotional roots. And so it's something that we feel very passionate about. It's something that we realize is not really talked about, especially in our instant gratification world today. Emotions, who cares? Take a pill, bury the emotions. You're
right.
Good. Let's get on to more important things. How about your back pain? Let's give you a pain medicine. But we never took the opportunity to actually dig up the root cause of the pain. And so, you know, once, you know, kind of like you said, emotional wellness is not just treating trauma. Emotional wellness is understanding the different pathways that create either hypersensitivity or what Robert S. Elliott, he's a doctor, he calls hypervigilance. What creates those? Could be anger, could be fear, could be depression, could be low social support. I mean, all these things that we typically don't connect to emotional wellness are things that we need to start recognizing, are things that we need to start understanding, because many of those autoimmune issues, now while the Western medical world doesn't really know a whole lot about the autoimmune issues, there is a lot of answers in the alternative world. And a lot of alternative world studies and a lot of alternative world just traditional uses is connecting that those autoimmune diseases are stemming from those three core issues: toxins, diet, emotions.
Emotions, yeah. Thank you, Ori. Well, in closing, guys, I just want to share something with you. It's kind of interesting. I've been doing a lot of research also on the three different brains in the human body, how they function and how they work together, and when we land in one of those three brains due to emotional wellness. Guys, there are triggers in your life, and it's kind of amazing how we will attach triggers to it. So if you had a real stressful thing happen to you, or out of control thing happen to you, or a lot of worry, a lot of times the trigger can be the time of day. The trigger can be an aroma. The trigger can be a visual thing. And it can actually go in and create that trigger, and you'll have that entire emotional flood all over again. And so the important thing is, as we start to really educate you in this emotional wellness area, that you are able to pick up on your personal triggers, and that you develop an emotional toughness, that you will be able to make sure that you stay within the cognitive brain and not in the emotional brain or even drop to the reptilian brain. And if you can stay in the cognitive brain, you will be able to be more rounded, more in control, and be able to take care of your emotional wellness. Remember, health is not a habit, it's an event. You need to be engaged. You need to be involved in your health. Don't give it over to a third-party person to do. Make sure that you are engaged. Make sure that you understand what your needs are so that you can take care of it and have the best chance and the best opportunity to enjoy your life and have a great, not only long, but fulfilled life as you work on your emotional wellness. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.